Recording in progress.
Welcome in everyone. Welcome to Care Concierge with CarePatrol, where education is the heart of everything we do. We appreciate you joining us here on Monday, February 20. As Jessica Friedman of the Friedman Law Firm will be presenting to us a topic that was suggested by one of our former attendees, as are the majority of our topics. And she will be discussing determining medical disability. And I think this will be of great use to many of you who have had the opportunity to join us today. It's going to be a lot of information, so buckle up, get ready. We, as you all know, who've joined us, many of you know, CarePatrol is accredited by the Alabama Board of Nursing Practitioners, and additionally by the Alabama Board of Social Work Examiners. For social work, this Zoom presentation is considered a live or face-to-face contact hour. And the reason that is so is because we use an evaluation process that is password protected, and we give the password out at the end of today's session. Therefore, the board believes that you are and have been in attendance throughout the presentation because of this password system. So we give the password out at 12:55. And as we have a number of you in the room now, I'd like to read to you, for those of you who are participating by phone or otherwise can't see a screen, I'd like for you to know the evaluation password for today's session. We'll also give it out again at the end of the presentation, along with the password itself. But the link, if you care to make note of it, is https://www.surveymonkey.com/all uppercase letters J 2 Q Z as in zoo, F as in Frank, H B as in boy. So we've still got folks joining. I'll give another minute or two and reread the link for those of you that need to make note of it. And I'll remind you that on Friday of this week, particularly you social workers, we're going to be doing an ethics unit, and it is on the NASW Code of Ethics. So any of you that need either A, an ethics unit, or B, a sort of refresher on the Code of Ethics, please look forward to joining us then. You can always sign up for our presentations on our website at carepatrol.com. Once there, click on my face, the same face you see on the screen today because my camera is not working. Click on my face. It will take you to our page, our landing page, in which you can register. And then I want to remind everyone that we encourage, and I know Jessica Friedman is looking forward to your discussion. And so you have two ways of offering up your opinions, and we hope that you will. One is the chat room. The other is that you have the ability to unmute your microphone and join the conversation. Now, if you're new to Zoom, the way that you would access the chat room and mic, or to take your cursor and move it to the top of your screen or down to the bottom of your screen, in which case a bar will pop up or down respectively. And on that bar is a picture of a mic. Click that, you unmute. There's also the word chat. Click that, the chat room comes up for you. So I do want to encourage discussion and questions. I know that we're all enriched when you add our voice, or your voice rather, to ours, and your opinion matters. So we do seek your opinions here, and we look forward to having you all in. Let me read one more time then the evaluation link, and I'll introduce Ms. Friedman, who will get started. Our password today, the link is SurveyMonkey, and it is https://www.surveymonkey.com/r/ all uppercase letters and some numbers. It is J2QZ as in zoo, F as in farm, H, B as in boy. And I will place, Ms. Durham, that in the chat room for those of you who just joined. There is the SurveyMonkey link. Again, we'll give the password out about 12:55. And without further delay, I will introduce you to Jessica Friedman, who is in partnership with her father at the Friedman Law Firm. They do a great bit of corporate work and tax work, but she also does disability work. And she was kind enough when I asked her to be comfortable doing this discussion with her, providing this information to us. And so I want to thank her publicly for going to the great effort to create this presentation and now deliver it, and also for the work that she does, because I know there are people who seek disability whose lives are forever changed by her work. So Jessica, thank you for what you do, and please enlighten us more on how you do what you do.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Sean. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. As Sean said, please do not hesitate to ask questions as we go along. I am going to cover a lot of information. I will try to go slowly and explain as we go. But if I say something that does not make sense or that you need me to repeat, please ask me to do that. So today we're going to be talking about medical disability. Now, I am a lawyer. I do disability work. I also have a degree in tax, and I'm going to be talking about disability, but I'm going to be talking about legal issues as well as tax issues. But my disclaimer, because I'm a lawyer, is that I am not giving legal or tax advice. So if you want that information, you've got to find your own advisor for it. So today we're going to do three things. We're going to discuss the definitions of disability, and when my practice focuses on Social Security disability, railroad disability, and VA disability. So those are the three contexts that I'm going to be discussing it within. I'm going to point out the pitfalls that my clients see and that your clients probably see, and I'm going to explain how you can help your clients get through this process. So I'm going to tell you, we're going to go through this. We are going to think of our hypothetical person named Mike. Mike is 48 years old. He has lumbar degenerative disc disease with radiculopathy. He has depression. I think it's helpful to use an example just to see how the rules apply. And this happens to be a common client, a common scenario for me across the board. Someone who has an orthopedic problem that causes pain, and they've got depression. Let's start with Social Security's definition of disability. Social Security considers someone disabled if they are unable to engage in any substantial gainful activity due to physical or mental impairment that has lasted or is expected to last at least 1 year or to result in death. So what does it mean to be unable to engage in any substantial gainful activity? That means that you can't do significant work. You're not able to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You're not able to do work for pay or profit, and there is an earnings limit that they look at. This year, it's $1,470 a month. If you are earning $1,470, which very few people can even survive on, they think that you're not disabled. This becomes one of our pitfalls that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And they also look at the number of jobs that are available in the national economy. If you can do a job consistently in the national economy, it doesn't matter if you live in the middle of the boondocks and you can't get to these jobs. It does not matter as long as those jobs appear in significant numbers in the economy. So Social Security looks at physical and mental impairments, or combination of the two. It doesn't have to just be one. They're looking at the whole person. That's a question that my clients often ask. They tell me that they're applying for disability for their back condition. But Social Security is going to look at everything, your mental conditions, any other conditions that you have. If you have diabetes and you have trouble controlling it, that's going to be part of it. They look at everything. And you have to have a condition that has lasted or is expected to last at least 1 year or to result in death. Now, a lot of conditions, you don't know how long they're going to last. Some of them you do. Of course, conditions that are terminal or chronic conditions that may not have a way to treat or are not going to be cured, they will last more than a year or result in death.
I'm sorry, Jessica, could you speak up?
Sure. Okay, so the point here is that it's all or nothing. This is not short-term disability. It's not partial disability. Either you're disabled or you're not. Either you get the benefit or you don't. So railroad disability, they use the same definition as Social Security, what we just went through. But they also have some other rules. They also have what they call occupational disability, which is if you can prove that you're unable to do your regular railroad occupation, or total disability, if you can't do any regular and gainful work. So we might have, for example, a railroad conductor who worked 20 years for the railroad. He might meet the occupational rule if he can't do his own job because he worked more than 10 years. Sorry, he's had more than 20 years. If he's too young, on our last guy, let's say our last guy, Mike, we were talking about, let's say that he was the railroad conductor. So he's only 48. He doesn't meet the occupational rule, which is that you have to be unable to do your regular railroad occupation and you are 60 and need 10 years of service, or you can be 20, you can have 20 years of service at any age. So he would meet the rule, but he's not old enough and he would have had to do 20 years instead of 10. It's very complicated. But I just wanted to mention that there are a couple different ways to prove that. Or if we can prove that he can't do any type of work, then he could meet the rule for total disability. And they use the same rules as Social Security, like I said, about definition of disability. And some people will have worked and they may be eligible under both programs, they work together, Social Security and the Railroad Board work together to figure out which is going to give you the highest benefit. And if you apply under the wrong one, I've seen people apply under Railroad and Social Security says, no, you should be under our program. They will make that transition for you. Now we're going to talk about veterans' disability compensation. Let's say that our guy Mike was a paratrooper. He jumped out of airplanes, and that's why he has his degenerative disc disease with radiculopathy. He has a current medical condition, which is what's required for veterans' disability compensation. You have to have a current medical condition, an injury or event in service. So maybe he had a bad landing when he made a jump. Then you have to have connection, what they call a nexus between the two conditions, between the condition and what happened in service. And what your current condition is has to be at least 50-50 have been caused by something in service. They call that at least as likely as not. So, people have degenerative disc disease just because they have been very active during their lives. They may not have had, it may not be because of their service, but if the doctor can't say that it was more likely something else, very often they'll say, well, it's as likely as not that it was that bad jump as it was that you injured yourself doing CrossFit, something like that. So that's what we're looking at. 3, the current medical condition, an injury or event in service, and a connection between the two. So as we know, pain often leads to depression in our clientele. So we will often talk to social workers or doctors and ask for a statement from them about their treatment of this person and whether or not they think it's at least as likely as not that the depression was caused by the pain or has been worsened by the pain, because either of those will get that condition connected for disability for VA. Under the VA program, body parts and body systems are rated and considered individually. The ratings go from 0 to 100, and that correlates the amount of limitation that the veteran experiences due to their condition and how it affects their ability to make a living. So this program, unlike Railroad and Social Security, it does provide partial disability, very much like a workers' comp case, by body part. Okay, so this is where we're going to stop at the end of our first little section. Does anyone have questions about the definitions that we've gone through?
I have one question about the veteran's disability. Is that also known as the DIC sometimes?
No, DIC is dependence and indemnity compensation. So that would be for a spouse, usually is where we see it. If a spouse dies, like so you're married, your husband dies from a service-connected condition. So we've already been through this process with the veteran himself or herself, and they die from that condition. We often see it people who served in Vietnam and have Agent Orange exposure, and then they die from heart disease. So because they die, if we work very closely with the spouses at that point to make sure that the death certificate says the right things on it. I want the death certificate to say that it's because of one of the conditions that the person is already service connected for. Then we apply with the surviving spouse to try to get them money based off of that condition that their spouse died from. So that's DIC, dependent and indemnity compensation.
Excellent. And so then my other question is, do you do aid and attendance applications?
I don't.
Okay.
Aid and attendance is separate. It's a need-based benefit, and it's not one that I do. I do the ones that are specifically related to service themselves.
Got you. And then my last question is, in the first slide, you had the definition was around gainful employment. I forget the acronym, SAG maybe. And I wonder, SGA, who defines how gainful your gainful employment is?
They have a few different tests. They have, Social Security defines it as the ability to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But you also will be you'll be making SGA if you're making more than that $1,470 a month. So it could be either of those things. If you're able to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you only make $1,000 a month, too bad, so sad, you're not disabled. If you work by, let's say you're a 1099, and you're a contractor and you're able to work and you may work 1 week out of the month and make $1,500, but the other 3 weeks you can't work, too bad, you're over the limit. That's SGA.
Okay.
So Social Security defines it. There are ways to get around SGA, which is things like sheltered work environments. If you have a special relationship with your boss, like we often see this with adult children who have intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities, and they can't work competitively, but their parents pay them a lot more than what the actual work would be worth on the open market. And so we can get around that by showing that it's not competitive, substantial gainful activity.
Okay. Okay.
There are some other little
Right.
tricks like that.
I'm
but that's
sure there
one
are
of them.
many that you know.
Yeah. So no questions from the chat yet?
None yet. We're warming up. We'll get there in a minute.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask again in a couple minutes here. Okay, so some pitfalls. Like I said, Social Security, disability, and railroad, I'm going to address them together because they're similar. Okay, the process is slow. Slow. Since the pandemic began in 2000, I've seen initial applications on both programs take 12+ months. Sometimes they're quick, but very often they are stuck. And a year is a really long time to go without earnings. If you think about it, all our financial advisors tell us to, save 3 to 6 months worth of expenses as your emergency fund. Even if you're really good and you've got 9 months worth, that's not enough. And if you lose at the initial level, which is common, it can be another 12 to 18 months before you get to the end of the process. And I'm defining the end of the process as being able to see a judge. A lot of cases get awarded at that point because that's when you are talking to a lawyer. The people at the initial level and the reconsideration level, which is the first 2 levels, are not lawyers. They are state employees who have a lot of things on their desk, just want to get through it. So you can get awarded at the hearing level with a judge, but it could be 2 years. It could be 2.5 years before you get there. So what we see is people who end up returning to work. Remember, the definition of disability under these programs is the inability to engage in work. So after a person has worked a certain amount of time and earned a certain amount of money, they are, by definition, not disabled. And so clients call me all the time and they say, well, how was I supposed to pay my bills? I had to go back. Well, Social Security doesn't really care. If you're able to work, then you're able to work and you're not disabled. So this is something that we see. But again, there are ways to get around this. Let's say that you try to work and you fail. If you've worked 6 months or less, then there is a mechanism to get around that work because you weren't able to sustain it. You have to be able to sustain the work. Unemployment is another one that we see. I see people see unemployment as a way to get around this earnings issue. Often they're desperate, they need money to keep the lights on, they have no other way to pay their bills. But think about what you have to tell the government when you apply for disability, for unemployment. You have to certify, in Alabama, you have to certify that you're able to work and you're available to work. You are actually able, available, seeking work, and willing to immediately accept full-time work. So if you are able to do all those things, that flies in the face of the definition of disability, which is the inability to work full-time. Now, Social Security, their official stance is that getting unemployment does not preclude you from getting Social Security disability, but I will tell you they do not like it. And I point out with my clients, okay, I try to plead that was the only way they could pay their bills, but also just because you're looking for work and you think you might be able to work doesn't mean that you can do it consistently. So I see clients who will try to go back to work, like I said before, and they won't be able to stay working. So that's how I try to get around it with Social Security. It's just because the person thought that they were able to work. They didn't say that they knew that they could sustain it, but they were willing to try. Sometimes that's a successful argument, and sometimes it's not. The COVID unemployment that happened during the pandemic made things worse because the requirements for looking for work were suspended, and Social Security never really figured out how to handle it. So that's still something that we have to address with them, although they're not supposed to consider that. Another one that I see is household income. So for Social Security, there are two programs. There is a needs-based program, which is called SSI, Supplemental Security Income, and SSDI, which is SSDI is the program that people pay into through their FICA taxes, and it funds retirement and disability. For the SSI benefit, there is a limit to the income and assets that the person can have. They look at cash, bank accounts, mutual funds. They count life insurance with a value over $1,500, any land or house that you might own besides your primary residence. And they do this because the benefit is a needs-based benefit. It's only intended to cover basic food and shelter. So if a person has more than $2,000 as an individual or $3,000 as a couple, you're over the limit. So again, it's very strict. And they do, there's a little, again, there are ways to get around certain parts of it, but very often the workers at the local offices don't do it correctly, and it takes a long time to fix. So it's better to prevent the problem than try to prove them wrong. And we see this very often with adult children. So if it's your spouse, then, and you have more than $3,000 in your bank account, you're not going to be able to get around it. If it's your parent, let's say that's an adult child living with their parent, what Social Security is going to do is they're not going to count all of the parent's income in the adult child's income. They are only going to offset, they're going to make a reduction to account for the shelter or food being provided. We usually see it as about a $300 decrease. So instead of getting 800 something, they end up with 500 something. Again, there are ways that you can make arrangements with, if you have a written arrangement with your parent saying that you're going to pay back the money, sometimes Social Security will consider that if it meets certain requirements, and they won't make the offset for that. I often see people who have had recent surgeries or treatments. And the thing to remember about this, there's not really anything you can do to get around it, but what's going to happen is Social Security and the railroad are going to kind of put your case on hold. They say, okay, so you had surgery, let's see how it turns out. Or you've just started chemo, you're certainly going to be cured. So instead of normal decision taking 12 months, I've seen them wait an additional 3 or 6 months and then go back. They do no development during that time. Then they just go back and start wherever they left off. So that's just something to keep in mind. For our veterans, what we see is many of them may not have a diagnosis or treatment for their claimed condition. So let's go back to Mike, our 48-year-old with back degenerative disc disease, lumbar degenerative disc disease with radiculopathy and depression. So let's say that he has gone to the doctor. He has back pain, and that's diagnosed. It's treated. The degenerative disc disease has been shown on MRIs. Great. But he's depressed, but he doesn't go to the doctor for the depression. I see that all the time, that our clients just suck it up. They have a stiff upper lip. They see there's no need to go to the doctor. They figure, if the back pain gets fixed, I won't be depressed. I'll just suffer through it. Well, without a diagnosis, you're not going to get a VA benefit. So you have to get treatment. This next one I'm not going to get into real deeply because it's extremely complicated. But you should know, and a lot of veterans don't understand this, so if you know it from your perspective, you may be able to tell them that there's more to it and they need to do some research or talk to someone who knows. But the rating computations are very complicated. So like I said at the beginning, they go from 0 to 100, and they rate each body part or condition according to how it affects your functioning. So you could have a rating for, so Mike could have a rating for his degenerative disc disease at 20%, 40% for the radiculopathy, and 50% for his mental health. Now, if you added 20 and 40 and 50, you would end up at 110%. But that's not possible. The most you can have is 100. And the way that I explain is it's diminishing returns. So they'll give you the 50 because that's the highest one. But then your 40% comes out of what's remaining, so the next 50%. And so you end up with 8, I think it is. And then, but now you're at 58, and then your next 20 comes out of what's left after that. So, no, sorry, 20, it was 20. 40% is 20. 40% of 50 is 20, so then you add the 20 to the 50 you had for depression, you're at 70. And then you've got 30% of a functioning body left, and your last 20% is of that. So you end up with a total of 76, which is rounded up to 80. Very complicated. I always have to do it bit by bit by bit. And as you can see, I still mess it up. And it's something that the veterans don't understand, and I don't expect you to get it either, but just know that it's complicated, because veterans often say, when I ask a veteran what their rating is, and they tell me that it's over 100, I know that they don't understand how the process works. And that affects, your rating affects how much money you get each month. So it's important to understand how it works. Now, 100% rating does not necessarily mean that you're disabled. Does not mean you're completely disabled and can't work. Individual unemployability is what VA uses. That's the term they use for someone who cannot work. They may be individually unemployable, which means they can't work full time. Very similar to the Social Security definition of disability, a little bit different. But I have a lot of veterans who are rated 100%, just because the numbers add up that way. They can still work, and they do work, and they collect the benefit at the same time. Individual unemployability pays at the 100% rate without requiring the struggle against the percentage calculations. So this is something that I talk to our veterans about a lot, that they all want 100%, but there may be a different and more efficient way of getting there. So you can get the same payment, but if you can't work, you can do it without having to deal with the diminishing returns of the calculations. Okay, do we have questions at this point?
We have no questions in the chat room. Has anyone else got questions? You're welcome to unmute your mic for discussion. We'd love to hear your voice, or you can enter into the chat room and I'll ask Ms. Friedman your questions. But we love your participation if you're so moved to do so today.
This is Cassandra. I have a question. Is depression within itself considered a disability just by itself? The diagnosis
Yes,
of depression?
It can be. It really depends on how much it affects your ability to work. So I know a lot of people who have depression and they are able to work, and they wouldn't be considered depressed. They wouldn't be considered disabled under Social Security or under Railroad, but they would be considered possibly as having a disability under the veterans benefits if that depression can be tied back to something that happened in service.
And also Sasha Moore is asking in the chat, she says, VA benefits can't be garnished, correct?
That's correct. And they're tax-free. So it's a better benefit than Social Security. We have a lot of clients and we get them both benefits, and the Social Security will be taxed, the VA will not. The VA will not be offset by other programs. a lot of clients will have long-term disability. And the long-term disability, the policy, if it's a group policy from their employer, will say that they must apply for Social Security disability, and that if their disability case is won, that the long-term disability company decreases the benefit that's paid by the amount that they get in Social Security disability. In general, they do not do that for veterans benefits, whether that's for policy reasons or other PR reasons. I don't know. I have seen a few policies that do offset, but it's only the difference. Like if a veteran comes in with 50% rating and they are, let's say that they're on claim for mental health, and we get them an increase in their mental health rating, that difference, let's say it was from 50 to 70, that's 20% difference. Sometimes long-term disability companies will offset that. Very often they won't. But the policies, when they do that, let's say that we got them an increase for their back, but their back is not why they're getting long-term disability. The long-term disability companies generally do not offset for that.
Ms. Moore has a follow-up, which is, I know that dependent children can get benefits through Social Security for their parents' disability. Is there a VA benefit similar?
Yes. So you tell the VA what your, how many dependents you have, whether it's a spouse or children, and they add on a certain amount, depending on how many of each you have.
And then Ms. Ward says, I have a veteran whose benefits are being garnished for back child support.
I think that's the only garnishment that can be done.
Okay.
And it's tricky. It's something that's come up a few times. But it doesn't happen that often. And the procedures, you have to apply for something at the VA to get them to do it. The VA is not really excited about doing that. And it may, and I don't know if it's garnishment or it could be in in their divorce decree, could have something about paying benefits and maybe they didn't pay them. You know, it's always tricky about how to do that.
And Ms. Rafalski has a question, excuse me. And hers is, if someone is approved for Social Security disability, do they back pay from the date of application?
That's a really good question. Okay, so for the need-based benefits, they pay from the date of application, assuming that they found you disabled starting on that date. Social Security loves to say, well, you weren't disabled on that date, but you were disabled a year later, so we're going to pay you from that date, from a year later. So that's how it works for SSI, the needs-based benefit. For the benefit on SSDI, which is based off of your earnings, the most that they can go back, they can pay 1 year prior to the date of application. Now, there is a waiting period for Social Security disability. It's a 5-month waiting period. So if you add that to 12 months, it means if you went out 17 months before you applied, there'll be a 5-month waiting period, which you wouldn't have gotten money for anyway. And then your benefit could start, your back benefit could start 1 year prior to your application. But that's as far back as they will go.
And then Ms. Ward had a follow-up, I believe, to that. There's a backdoor way to stop it, but I can't remember what it's called. I work very closely with the VBA.
Yeah, when it comes to divorce stuff, that's definitely not my specialty. Family law is not my thing. That's what I'm saying. I've seen it, but I know that it's rare because there are ways to get around it.
Okay, and Ms. Beatty has a comment and a question. So frustrating that people who have worked hard and paid into the system have such a lengthy and sometimes litigious process to get coverage. Why do you think this is? The volume of applications, understaffed SSA, so much attempted fraud, just typical bureaucracy, etc. What has led to this being such a cumbersome system?
So there actually is not all that much fraud. When they do investigations, there's not that much. The issue is staffing. That's the main issue. I read something just yesterday that the Social Security Administration still says that there are going to be even longer delays this year than there were last year. They have they lost staff all through the pandemic, and those that they didn't lose have been working from home, and they're starting to ask them to come back to the office. So more of them are quitting. It is very, very difficult to get through to the Social Security Administration on the phone. Even my staff will spend 45 minutes to an hour just sitting, waiting on hold. So it's impossible for claimants themselves. It's a huge waste of time. And the workers are overworked. They just want to get through what's on their desk. They do have quotas. They are supposed to get through a certain amount a day, but that's impossible. And I have some claims where the original person who was working on it quit. It got moved to someone else's desk. That person quit. After keeping it, each of them kept it for 6 months before they quit. And so it's onto a third person. Got them onto a third person now. And they're going to take them supposedly in the order that they got them. But if they've got way more than they can handle, I'm not really sure what to expect them to do. There was an article in the Washington Post about a month back that talked about the workforce at Social Security and how much attrition there has been. I do think that's the main issue. And also at the initial and reconsideration levels, the first two levels, they go by a manual. They do the same things at VA. They go by a manual, and the manual does not necessarily lay out perfectly what the law is. And their job is to check the boxes and go through the manual. And they don't think outside the box at all. So one of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute, next thing, is how you can help and what they can be looking for, but they don't always look for it at the earlier level. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. If they see it, sometimes that will lead to an award. But if it doesn't lead to an award at that point, it will help later on. I'll talk about that in a minute.
And Ms. Beatty followed up just to say, I work in dialysis, and degree staffing is a huge issue. And often you get a different answer with every different employee you talk to.
That's correct. I tell my clients, don't call Social Security ever for anything. It's just not worth it. The answers are wrong, and then you get upset, and then you call me and ask me why that person told you that. And I don't know why that person told you that, because it's wrong. And I can prove to you that it's wrong, but once a client starts believing Social Security over their attorney, then your ship is sunk. Bad news. We ready to move to the next part here?
I'm sorry, our questions are all in at the moment.
Okay. So how can you help? For Social Security disability, remember that some cases do qualify immediately. So remember that the durational requirement is that they are expected to last 12 months or more or result in death. So terminal conditions and degenerative conditions are going to qualify immediately. When I say immediately, I mean someone at Social Security has to figure out that it's one of these conditions, and they have to flag it. So I flag all my cases for, MS, for frontotemporal dementia, developmental conditions like cerebral palsy, Down syndrome. If the limitations are bad enough, those should qualify. So I flag those, but then I've got to wait for someone to actually look at the file and see that it has been flagged. It is very difficult to get through to the people on the phone. The people that you call at the field office are not the people making the decision. The people making the decision are a different state agency called Disability Determination Services. And I know people there that I can call to help, but got to use that sparingly. If you are treating patients and they talk to you about their trouble getting to work or trouble concentrating because of pain, note that in your records. The frequency and duration are really important. If they need to lay down because of pain, they're not leaving the house because of depressive episodes, how often are they laying down? How long do they lay down for? How often are they not leaving the house? And how long does that last? Because if you are not leaving the house, usually what I can get we have vocational experts at the hearing level, and we have them at the earlier levels also, but I don't get to talk to them. But this is what I'm saying, if a vocational expert sees that in the file, usually if a person is going to miss 3 or more days of work per month or be off task because of their conditions for more than 2 hours in an 8-hour workday, that is not consistent with Social Security's definition of the ability to work. Because you're not working consistently 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I will often ask our client providers to give me a statement. And I ask these questions about how much the person's going to miss, whether they're going to be off task, what can be expected. But for that to hold water, I need to see those same limitations showing in the medical records. So if you say the person has pain and they're laying down, I want the medical records to say the same thing. So I talked about the limitations on income and resources for SSI clients. So you guys may be familiar with ABLE accounts. The Achieving a Better Life Experience Act was made law in 2014. It's a tax advantage savings account for people who have disabilities. And it allows the clients to keep their eligibility for public benefits such as SSI, food stamps, Medicaid. And the money can be used for things such as education, mainly maintenance, food, housing, transportation. And you can let the money build. I think that you can give in Alabama, so every state has their own ABLE account set up. And my understanding is that you don't even have to use the one from your state because not all states have them, but they all have different rules. I think Alabama's contribution limit is $17,000 a year, but you can put up to $100,000 in there before it starts affecting your eligibility for public assistance. And special needs trusts do the same thing. ABLE was just a way of getting the benefits of the special needs trust to the general public without having to go through the cost of getting an attorney to write a special needs trust. But the special needs trust does not have a maximum account limit. The money can be used for other expenses beyond the basic living expenses, things like vacations or therapies not covered by Medicaid. But again, you'll need a lawyer to do that. So it's a little more difficult.
Ms. Ward has a comment, which is,
okay.
I'm not sure, Terry, cases get you moved to the top of the list. Dialysis is the only automatic that guarantees disability. However, that could change since more individuals who receive dialysis treatments are working while doing those treatments.
That's absolutely correct. So Terry cases are the terminal illness. There's a list of them, and those cases are the ones that we try to flag. But like when I say that they get immediate turnaround, I mean 6 months. I had a client last year who died. She had cancer, and she was on the list and didn't get her decision in time. And then I had another client who also was approved, but she was approved during those first 5 months, so she got no back benefits. But her children continued, they were able to get other benefits on her record until they turned 18.
That's it from us for now.
Okay. So railroad disability annuities. Just like I said that it's important to help with opinions on the Social Security side, on the railroad side, they have a very specific form, and it's called the G250. 7-page form. It's used across the board for all conditions, and the Railroad Board is going to request it on all cases. And because it's one form, it covers all kinds of information that may or may not be applicable to your client. So the musculoskeletal part talks about range of motion, muscle strength, sensory reflex abnormalities. There's a cardiovascular section, respiratory, neuro, vision, hearing, and speech. On the mental section, which is where I see most of our social workers filling stuff out, you would describe the impairment, any emotional reactions to different situations, what the person's conduct is. The form asks about their orientation and insight, their judgment, their memory, if they've had any mental deterioration. There also is a place to note changes in ADLs, activities of daily living. It asks about medications, response to medications. There's a section for environmental restrictions and other things like that. So you can fill it out. You can, if you work under a doctor and you can get the doctor to fill it out, that's what Railroad Board is looking for. They rely heavily on that form. And when I've had pushback from providers to fill it out, it holds up the application. Like everything comes to a dead stop. And what will eventually happen is, much like on Social Security, they're going to send out the client to one of their examiners, which very rarely turns out well for the clients, because now they're going to someone who has never met them before, who's getting paid maybe $100 to see them. They just want to get through them all. Very often the clients tell me that their range of motion tests, they were never touched. Like my clients who do tender point testing for their fibromyalgia say they were never touched, which just blows my mind. So if you can fill this form out, please do. It is a huge help to the clients. Again, on here, if you can list off-task behaviors, whether distraction, but maybe just from pain, it could be from just mental impairments that are distracting, even frequent doctor's appointments. The person has to go to the doctor frequently, and that's going to cause them to miss work. I would write that down as well. Providing medical records. Social Security, for the most part, is good about requesting medical records. The Railroad Board, not so much. They ask us to file the application with all the medical records provided, including the G250. That's what we do. I don't even know if they request the records themselves. Not that I've seen, but that's because I submit all my medical records. But that means that the client is going to have to get them, or I'm going to have to get them. So responding to the medical records request timely is important. And it may be coming directly from the client as opposed to the agency. And again, what I was saying, the ability to attend and maintain work consistently is very important. For the veterans' disability compensation, I mentioned nexus letters, saying that it's at least as likely as not that one condition is either due to another condition that's already service-connected, or that it's aggravated by that condition, or that it's at least as likely as not that the current condition is caused by something that happened in service, whether it's an injury or an event. And when because of the special language, it's like at least as likely as not is magic language to the VA. If you say it's as likely as not, that doesn't work. You've missed the word. If you say it's more likely, okay, we might be okay. If you say it's just as likely, maybe. But these are the words that they're looking for. And so we will work with social workers in particular when they're writing their mental health opinions or their mental health, what we call nexus statements, nexus letters. And we will wordsmith to get the right words in the right places so that it touches all the bases. So, we appreciate when people are willing to work with us on that. The VA when they are evaluating different conditions, use something called disability benefits questionnaires. And they go through, it's very much like the G250 that I talked about for railroad, but it's a different form for each body part, body system. The veterans can get a hold of those forms and bring them to you, and they can use those in their cases, and that can preempt the Veterans Administration from sending them out for an exam. The veterans doctors, the ones they send them out to, tend to be better than the ones on Social Security, but still not always great. It also means they have to wait until time for their case to be scheduled. If you are able to fill these out, then that will help speed up the process for the veterans. This stuff is really complicated. The veterans is particularly complicated. And so I would always suggest that they find an advocate, whether that's a veterans service officer, whether it's an attorney or a non-attorney representative. They can answer these questions. We spend the majority of our time answering questions for veterans, even veterans who are not our clients. We can only help a small percentage of people who call us every day. But we know that there are not very many resources out there for veterans who give them the right answer every time. And calling the 800 number is worthless. They seem to read a script. Had a veteran call me earlier this week and say, I called the 800 number and they told me that I don't have a claim pending. They said, well, you do have a claim pending. It's just that it's in the court system higher than the VA itself. So when the VA, who you think the VA is, when they look at your file, they don't see anything pending because it's not pending in front of your local regional office. It's higher up than that. So again, wrong information. So if they can find a trusted resource, I would always suggest that they do that. And that goes also for railroad and for Social Security, but veterans benefits is where people really seem to get off track and get incorrect information.
And we have a comment from Mrs. Mack. Social Security related person had child support taken out for more than 10 years after he completed his payments for support. Because no withholding order was sent to Social Security, Social Security would not stop the withdrawal from his benefits. Social Security and DHR says there's nothing they can do about the overpayment. How can he get a refund for all the overpayments?
I have no idea, and I would send him to a family law attorney. So I have someone that I refer to for family law issues like that, because it's interesting. It borders on the work that I do, but it's not quite there, and I'm not willing to speculate about it. So I think that I would try a family law attorney.
Ms. Chestnut says, great topic, information, and appreciated. Thanks much.
Thank you. I'm glad that you have found it helpful.
And Ms. Alexander said the presentation is very informative. Thanks for a job well done.
Thanks. So Social Security, Railroad, and the VA have some similarities in the way that they define medical disability. They do determine their payment amounts differently. Railroad tends to have a two-tier program where they pay a little bit more than Social Security. And the VA pays a lot more than usually both of them. The max VA benefit is like $3,500 before you start adding in dependents. So it's a lot. And like I said, it's tax-free. And just remember, the VA does provide partial disability, whereas the other two programs do not.
This information was very helpful. Thank you. Very good and helpful info. For those of you who need it, still, I'll read to you the link for today's evaluation. It is https://www.surveymonkey.com/r. / all uppercase letters and some numbers, J 2 Q Z as in zoo, F as in Frank, H B as in boy. And the password today is in honor of our speaker, Ms. Friedman. The password is Friedman. That's capital FRIEDMAN. Friedman is the password. Thank you so much, Jessica. It was so informative, and I learned a great deal, and I'm sure our attendees learned a great deal as well. Now, if any of them should have a potential client for you, who would be someone whom they might come across whom you could help?
So I didn't go into some of the I used the most common definitions of disability for Social Security, but if you start to see someone who's had a long career and they're starting to have trouble maintaining that career and they're not retirement age yet, that would be someone. So professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants who are starting to have trouble keeping their job or keeping up with their job, we can get disability for them. We do some children's cases, but the parent's income is going to be taken into consideration. So if it's a low income parent, sometimes parents have to stay home and care for the children because the children have such behavioral issues. Those are people that we can help also. And on the veteran side, we see a lot of, right now we're taking care of a lot of people who have, who've been to Afghanistan and Iraq, who are coming back with PTSD. And they deny it for a long time. And then one day they wake up and they just say, I can't work. This is not working. I'm having outbursts at work. I need some help. So those people are the people that I would keep an eye out for.
Well, thank you for taking care of those people. I know we all appreciate it, particularly those who have service-connected injury or disability. We appreciate the work that you do. And again, I appreciate you personally for coming on today and sharing your information. I know we were all enriched by it, and certainly would love to have you back if you feel there are other topics that would enlighten our nurses and social workers on the line. Thank you so much, Ms. Friedman. Truly appreciate you. Thank you to all of you who are here. We're way past time, so I'm going to end the meeting. Y'all have a great week.